So welcome to Courage Dear Heart. This is Charli Wall, and today I am joined by the very lovely Chana Studley. Welcome, Hannah.
Hi, Charli. Nice to be here. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And I've been wanting to get you on my podcast for a very long time because a lot of my clients I've recommended your work to, and you've written a book called Painless, and that's the one I've recommended, but you've also written 2 other books, haven't you?
One other book, yeah, and I have a new one coming out very soon, hopefully. Yeah.
The first one being The Myth of Self-Esteem.
Myth of Low Self-Esteem, yeah, that one's more about trauma, and then the new one's going to be, well, is about hormones. So they're all novels. And so then I'm just waiting for Christine Heath she's writing the foreword, hopefully. So I'm waiting to
Oh
hear
my
from
gosh,
her.
I love
Yeah.
I love Christine. Well,
Yeah.
I'm so pleased to have you on. And the other main reason I wanted to get you on is because you talk about and have healed from chronic pain and PTSD, and you work with people who are suffering from long COVID, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and a lot of my client group have certainly a lot of those things. I myself have healed from PTSD and chronic anxiety and a multitude of other stuff. So I was really excited to get you on because we're going to be doing this podcast interview, and then we're going to be going live into my circle community so you can answer some questions from that group. Before we start, the question I always ask my guests is, because my podcast is called Courage Dear Heart, what does courage mean for you?
You know, it's such a great question. When you told me that the question, I remember it took me back to a few years ago. I was speaking locally to a women's group, and I think I told my story twice in 1 week, and people kept coming up to me and saying, "Wow, you have so much courage." You know, courage for, you know, the surviving the violence I went through in my 20s, courage for changing careers, courage for changing countries, you know, courage for like being self-employed my whole life, you know, and they kept saying, "Where'd you get this courage from?" And when someone asks you a where question, it usually implies there's a place, right? Yeah. And from a 3 principles perspective, that doesn't make any sense. So I thought I'll put my 3 principles hat on. I thought, so courage must be thought, because everything is made of thought. Everything is made, you know, of thinking. And I thought, no, it doesn't seem right. And I remember I was on a course with Linda Pransky at the time, and we had some session, and I suddenly thought, oh, I know what it is. Courage is when the thinking stops. It's like, it's a quiet mind. I remember at the time seeing that, you know, because when I have done things like change countries and change careers and stuff like that, there's still what to do. Like there's thinking to, you know, like you've got to decide where you're going to live and what to, you know, decisions to make. But having a quiet mind about it enables you to just go and, you know, deal with what's important, and then just, you're not, I know, held down by all the busy thinking. Courage for me was being able to let the busy thinking settle and go and do it anyway.
Yes, yeah? Yes.
And
yes.
not be held back by all that busy thinking.
Yeah, I really hear that, and we have that in common. A lot of people used to say that to me, you know, and similarly, I've changed careers and moved house and la 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 la, and I used to get that question. It was one of the reasons I actually wanted to name the podcast this, because I saw so much courage in people that they couldn't see in themselves. Yeah. And I think that's the 3 principles for me, and a lot of my community, as I mentioned earlier, don't really understand what it is, and you know, haven't really got an idea of it. I'm losing you a little bit. Are you losing me?
It froze for a second there, but we're back.
Okay, good. So yeah, let's talk about you, Hannah. How did you come across the 3 principles?
It was through a former colleague of mine. She and I were teachers together in Los Angeles. After I left the film business, I was a school teacher for 5 years. And I was the art teacher, and this lady was the music teacher. So we were kind of like the art department. And then when I left America and I moved here to Israel, she often comes to visit because she has family here. And whenever she comes, we sit and have lunch or a long breakfast and chat and for hours and hours and like catch up and gossip a little bit. And one particular time we'd been talking for like literally 2 hours. And then suddenly she said to me, I went to a workshop a few days ago and I think you'd really like it. And I said, oh yeah, what was that? And she goes, you know, and it was so funny after talking for 2 hours, and then she was speechless. I said, well, because at that point I had no clue what she was talking about. It was completely, I said, well, how fantastic is it if you can't even describe it? And she's like, well, it's like, so I started giving her a nudge. I said, is it a diet? And she's like, no. I said, is it a like exercise program? She's like, no. I said, is it a philosophy? And she goes, well, kind of, but not really. And then at that point, she grabbed a napkin from the cafe that we were in and she wrote down Sydney Banks, Mind, Thought and Consciousness, and pushed it across the table to me. She said, go look it up. I think you'll like it. And I wish I kept that napkin because I would have framed it, you know, like I'd put it in a frame, you know, in my house by now. But I literally came in, sat here, got on my computer. And I was like, oh, she's right. This is it. This is it. Because I mean, I've been coaching people for, 25 years at that point. And I'd done lots of different trainings and different modalities and therapies, you know, and you know, got stuck in the Enneagram and the Course in Miracles and all the different things that we all try.
Yeah.
And I prided myself on being a searcher. And now I feel like I don't need to keep searching. I found the basic ingredients of all of those things. So, you know, as we point further upstream for people and see how those different modalities work, I don't need to keep searching anymore. I really feel like I found it. So yeah, it appealed for me right from the beginning.
I love that. I love how people just come across it and you know, you suddenly see something so profound. That was my experience. So your experience, from what I've read, you know, in your bio, is that you were attacked 3 times, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, being mugged once is bad enough, but like the first time my skull was fractured, I can put my finger on it right there. You probably can't see it, but I know where the bone knitted back together again. You know, it's probably actually much stronger there. And that happened in a nightclub in Manchester while I was a student. And then about 3 years later, I was walking home, 6 o'clock in the evening, you know, also in Manchester, and 3 men came out of the dark, slammed me on the ground, beat the living daylights out of me. I'm guessing they were looking for money, which I didn't really have anything on me. And so I think they just kicked at time for my life. And that was about 1983, 84, which is right when PTSD first was put into the DSM as a diagnosis. So in Manchester in 1983, they didn't know anything about anything. I was basically told, you know, go home, have a cup of tea, suck it up and walk it off. You know, that was the treatment I got. And then I moved down to London after that, about a year later, and I was mugged again. A young boy threw a bicycle at my head, and he actually broke my neck, although I didn't know it at the time. And I got really in a really bad way after the third one, because I just became convinced that the world was a dangerous place and I shouldn't leave my house.
Yeah.
And I had evidence to prove it. You know, it wasn't like I was making it up. You could have said to me, let's go for a walk in the park, I'll come with you. I'd have been like, no, I'm not leaving the house. And I got very, very strange and very sick, and you know, went down fast after that third one. But luckily I've you know, eventually found a bunch of women who were worked in a crisis center who, you know, really helped me and pulled me out of it and started me on my journey of recovery from that. Yeah,
that's quite incredible. And from that, you experienced, obviously, you know, I'm guessing PTSD from that, but also you had quite a lot of chronic pain. Is that right?
Yeah. It didn't come immediately. Obviously I recovered from the injuries on each of those particular times, but it wasn't until, I guess, a few years later I started getting terrible pain in my shoulders. Sometimes I'd wake up with my arm numb, and I'd have terrible flare-up of back pain in my lower back. And then I'd start getting sciatica pain that would shoot down my legs. I was paralyzed several times. I mean, it would happen regularly, but every 6 weeks I'd have a flare-up, you know, and I had the chiropractor on speed dial, I had the yoga mat, I had the heating pads and the ice packs, and it was just became a way of life. And I went to the chiropractor every month for 25 years. And every time I would tell a new doctor or a new osteopath or a new chiropractor my story, they would want to know my medical history. So it start, you know, the fractured skull, the two broken vertebrae in my neck, the 3 herniated discs. And they go, oh, well, that's why you have all this pain. And I'm not medically trained, so I didn't know. So I kind of believed them, and I kind of carried around a picture of in my head that my body was weak, that my spine was going to crumble at any moment because it had been damaged so much. And I just thought of myself as weak and vulnerable in terms of my body, and I had to be careful, and I'd need treatment for the rest of my life. It's strange how calmly I accepted it now, but I just pictured myself, eventually I'd be in a wheelchair. Eventually, one of these times, the feeling's not going to come back in my legs, and I'm just going to be paralyzed for the rest of my life. And it was just a matter, like a ticking bomb, just a matter of time until that actually happened. And so that went on for 25 years. It just became a way of life. You know, I was able to do stuff in between, and then I'd get, you know, then I'd be on the floor again, and then I'd have to wait a few days, a week, whatever it was, and it'd go away, and then I'd get back on with my life. And I didn't know the pain could go away. So it wasn't until I came across the 3 principles, and I did a training course. I did the One Thought course with Aaron Turner in London.
Yeah.
And at the end of the course, I noticed all my pain had gone. And I hadn't done anything. And in fact, you know, living here in Jerusalem, I had to fly backwards and forwards to London to go and do the course. And those are all circumstances where it would have been really bad, you know, spending a lot of time in airports, sleeping at friends' houses, you know, spending money and not being at home, and, you know, that kind of stuff would have been what would have, you know, like, oh, my back would have been killing me. And nothing. And it's been, what, 6-7 years now, and I haven't had any major back pain at all. And I haven't been to the chiropractor, which is amazing to me.
Saving a lot of money.
Yeah.
So you did the One Thought program with Aaron because you wanted to learn more, or you wanted to coach from this understanding. So you didn't go with the intention of curing your pain.
Not at all. I didn't, like I said, I didn't even know it could go away. I didn't know there was a connection. Up until that point, I thought my pain was coming from structural, you know, injuries. Therefore, how could learning the principle, there was no connection in my head at the time.
Right.
I was so attracted to the principles, and I knew there was such, you know, depth here, that I wanted, it was like an investment for me. It was like I wanted to learn more. I mean, like I've been coaching for a long time, but I really wanted to deepen, you know, my understanding and get a better grounding in this. And Aaron's such a great teacher, and it was such a great group, and, you know, there were some amazing people in my group. And it wasn't until the end when I just I remember sitting in this chair going like, that's weird, like, where did all my pain go? And I mentioned it to someone I know here, and she asked me if I'd heard of Dr. Sarno. I don't know if you know that name.
Oh, God, I do. I've
Yeah.
got his book. I used to, before I came across the principles, I was recommending that book to people.
Right. So I'd never even heard of him, because, like I said, I wasn't looking to get rid of my pain, because I thought because I had these injuries, it would never go away. So this friend of mine suggested I read his book, and I happened to read his second book first. And in the first things I read was that how many people had gotten well just from reading his book. And I've since heard a lot of people say that, how could that be true? You know, like, come on, it's a book. But from an understanding the principles, it makes perfect sense. They had a shift in their thinking.
Yes.
I totally got that. And then the next thing I read was when he said, all injuries heal. And I thought, that's interesting, because if all my injuries have healed, that means they must have healed 25 years ago. How come I'm still in pain now? And that got me curious enough to start looking and reading. I've read a lot of pain science over the last, you know, 5-6 years, and really getting to understand the mind-body connection. Now, Dr. Sarno, as you probably know, then kind of went into like Freudian psychoanalysis to help his clients and patients to get to the depth of their suppressed rage and anger, which to me is just like, that's so last century. We don't need to be doing that. You know, we've got the principles to understand, you know, to help us. And so for those of you know, the people listening who don't know what the three principles are, they are a description of how all experience is created. So all of those, you know, different modalities and that were being suggested to people to help them with their pain and their suppressed rage and their anger and everything, like journaling and meditation and mindfulness. There's nothing wrong with any of those things, but what I found was they were like the long way around the houses, as it were. The principles, when you understand how experience is created, it's like taking a shortcut. It's like getting a taxi to the airport instead of, you know, like taking a bus and a train and a bus, and, you know, eventually you might get there. But I think what happened for me is, as I started to understand these ideas deeper and better, my thinking slowed down. And as my thinking slowed down, my brain got the message that I was safe. And once it got the message I was safe, it didn't need to keep producing the pain message anymore.
So that piece you just said is exactly the first insight I had around my anxiety, which I didn't even know I had for 20, however many years. The first insight was, oh, you didn't know you were safe. You didn't know you were safe. You just didn't know it. So you've been doing all these anxious things to keep yourself safe from that level of, even though I didn't know I was consciously doing that. So that piece you just said, I think, is so important, because that's what I see over and over again in people, is this, I don't know I'm okay. I don't know I'm good enough. I don't know I'm safe. Because what I discovered was, well, like the brain doesn't speak English, right? And it's stuck in this box called the skull. So it only has your 5 senses to rely on for information. So, and your 5 senses are only really as good as the thinking it produces from your eye, what you see, what you hear, what you taste. And if I don't feel safe, it's all those messages I'm going to interpret as like, you know, like what do they mean? I can remember sitting on the underground train, the tube in London, knowing that everybody hated me. You know? Oh, we're laughing because we could all feel, you can remember feeling like that.
And it's funny what you just said is so true, because say I've been around the 3 principles for a few years now, and I'm still just glimpsing just how anxious I was, and I would have never called it anxiety.
Yes.
Partly because I was right. You know, for example, don't leave the house because you're going to get hurt. I was right. You know, I had x-rays and police reports to prove it. There, you know, I was justified in a lot of my overthinking, and I saw it as the right thing to do. I think people with chronic pain, chronic physical issues are often, obviously this is a generalization, but most of us are perfectionists and overthinkers. And because I was right, I never saw that as anxiety. I just saw that as, you know, you've got to think it through from every angle to keep yourself safe and to do the right thing, and don't make a mistake because people reject you or laugh at you, and that'll be painful. And then, you know, what's the point? You might as well stay home, right? And I never saw that as anxiety. I just saw that as being, you know, careful or you know, planning, or, you know, I mean, what is Saturday afternoon for if it's not for overthinking everything? You know, so like, and like this example came to me a couple of months ago. I was walking through a car park in here where I live, and you know how they paint white lines on the tarmac to show you where to park your car, and there's always that idiot who parks way too close to one of the white lines, and then the people next to you can't open their door, they can't, it's a waste of another space. And I'm thinking, like, you know, it's so selfish, and why can't they spend, it's got nothing to do with me. But I'm supervising, monitoring, watching everybody and everything. And I think it came from the PTSD thing, where one of the major symptoms of PTSD is hypervigilance. And I think what happened is, as I those ladies helped me get well from the like acute PTSD, what happened is the hypervigilance kind of went inward, and I got very vigilant about my thinking. And all the self-help techniques that I was learning kind of taught me how to be very vigilant about my thought hygiene.
Yeah.
Don't have any negative thinking. Be careful. Don't think that, you know. And that's why I think when I found the 3 principles, it was such a relief to know that I didn't have to do anything about my thinking anymore. That thought is neutral and it's safe and it's just moving through. It's just energy. And I think that's why I started to feel safe, and my brain didn't need to keep producing the pain message anymore. Because I have the same body, my back, my legs, everything's the same, just different thinking.
So you set up a course, you did a sort of trial research on this, didn't you? You got some clients to study with and study on.
Yeah, I mean, like, I come from the film business. I know nothing about research or any of these things. So I put an ad on my local Facebook group and asked for some volunteers. And it was amazing. I had 30 replies in 2 days, because people in pain, you know, are desperate, and people were saying, I don't care what it is, sign me up. So I chose 5 people, and I tried to recreate what had happened in me. I presented them, you know, I gave them some understanding of how pain is created, the like biological, medical explanation for pain. And then started showing them that pain has no substance. Like you can't see pain on an X-ray. Like, all pain is real, but it's generated in the brain. And phantom limb pain is a great example of that. You know, like, there's lots of stories of people.
My dad was disabled. He had it. Yeah, they told him he would have no pain if they cut his leg off. And this was in 1994.
Wow.
And then he spent the rest of his life in chronic pain with this leg that was no longer there. So I have acute experience of that.
Right.
But it is a great
I mean, they call
example.
it a phenomenon, but it perfectly illustrates how pain actually happens in the brain. It's not, I mean, it's, you know, people often ask me, how did I go from doing special effects in Hollywood to being a pain coach? I say, because my job in Hollywood was all about convincing you that something was real that wasn't. Right? I was known for making copies of real animals, you know, talking animals in movies. They were puppets. Now, our brains have a better special effects department than anything me or Steven Spielberg could come up with, because my brain can convince me of all kinds of things that aren't true. And one of the and so pain is like the ultimate special effect, because it's projecting like a burning sensation or a tingling or a stabbing pain into a part of my body. And it's actually happening in the brain. It's a fascinating thing. And so once I started seeing that and explaining it to people, and then introducing how to understand how experience is created, how we're living this thought created world 100% of the time. And I'm not good at numbers, but I'm pretty sure 100% means there are no exceptions, right? and as I've gone on, I've started to see that it's not just thinking, because a lot of my pain clients would then say to me, yeah, but I wasn't thinking anything. I just woke up with a migraine. I woke up with, you know, my IBS was flared up. You know, it's like, I wasn't thinking anything. What do you mean? And then that's when I started getting deeper understanding of like thought. Thought is a creative energy, and it can show up in many different forms. It can show up as thinky thoughts, like do the laundry. No, I don't want to, you know, it can show up as like what I call thinky thoughts, but it can also show up as images and sounds and sensations, and pain, you know, is a sensation. So in that moment when I'm experiencing, when I was experiencing pain, it was a thought created energy experience. It's a bit of a mouthful, but one of the doctors that I really appreciated his research, his name's Dr. Lorimer Moseley, he's in Australia. And one of the first things I read was when he said, we only experience pain when it comes into consciousness. And that kind of got my attention, because a quick example is like, if you were home with the flu and you're miserable and you go into the kitchen to make yourself a hot drink and you stub your toe on the kitchen table and you're like, get away, who put that there? Right? Or imagine your friends are coming over with pizza and you're going to watch a movie and you stub your toe on the way to opening the door. You probably notice it, but after a few seconds, minute, you know, you've forgotten about it because your friends are over and you're having a good time. But it's the same tissue damage. right? Or how like a paper cut can kill. It sting like crazy, but you can get a bruise on your leg and you're like, where did that come from? You know, and that's real tissue damage. It's fascinating. So I started to see that pain is actually a signal, and it can be switched on and off in the brain. The intelligence of the system decides how to help us stay alive, how to preserve us, by sending pain sometimes and not other times. And I think I couldn't hear my stressful thinking. So my brain was producing pain to get my attention, and I didn't understand that either. So it's almost like the alarm had to get louder and louder and louder until I was, you know, paralyzed on the floor, screaming in pain. And now I can still have a funky thought or a wake up in a mood or something. Thank God it's not very often these days, but I don't have to freak out about it anymore. I know that it's going to pass. And so it doesn't have to turn into any of those physical things. Like my IBS is gone. I had chronic cystic acne. I had asthma. I had hay fever. I had, you know, allergies. All gone. You know, I've got a bit of congestion right now, but I mean, it's nothing like I used to have. You know, so it's like it's such a blessing to know how the system works, because then you don't have to suffer and be a victim of it anymore.
And so, you know, what I'm hearing in that is that my guess, well, a lot of my clients, as I've said, have these sort of similar symptoms, and I myself had alopecia and conjunctivitis, blepharitis, I had acne. The stress in our bodies manifests in different ways, and what I heard you saying there was that it was trying to wake you up. And if we don't know that, and what me and you mean by that is our body's very intelligent.
Yeah.
And so it's always trying to nudge us back to health. But of course, chronic stress causes chronic inflammation, causes dysregulation, causes pain, causes IBS. So what would you say then to the sort of people who might be listening to this podcast who are new to the principles, or may have heard me mention it but don't really quite understand it and have pain? What would you say to them to help them, I guess, see something around that for themselves?
I think for me, there's so many blessings to this understanding, but like Sydney Banks, who put these ideas together in the first place, well, his most famous quote is, oh, sorry, my cat just came. Sorry about that. It's my fan club here. There's a kitten somewhere too. His famous quote was that if only people could learn not to be afraid of their experience, that would change the world. And I see now how frightened I was of my moods, of my pain, of my relationships, like all kinds of things where I see now how scared I was. But I mean, I'm tall. I'm almost 6 foot tall. I was a punk rocker. I was, you know, like very political. Like I never thought of myself as an anxious person, because I would just go into Trafalgar Square and in a miners' strike, and like campaigning for Nelson Mandela to be free and all that stuff. I didn't think I was a scared person, but I was so wrapped up in what you thought of me and not making a mistake and doing it the right way and all that stuff, which was producing a very a mild drip effect of the fight or flight response was being activated all the time. And our bodies weren't designed to have the fight or flight response, you know, activated for such long periods of time. And I think that's what causes the dysregulation, like you said. So learning that I didn't have to be afraid of my own experience, my moods, my thoughts, was an incredible gift. And the other part of it is seeing that it's always moving on. So no matter what funky it moves through, the nature of thought is to keep moving. Like the nature of fire is to be hot, the nature of water is to be wet, the nature of thought is to move. So even if I have an inappropriate thought or a scared thought, an anxious thought, it's not me, it's just the form that creative energy is taken in that moment, and it's moved on, and it always moves on. And sometimes, you know, like if, you know, we innocently didn't know. And had I known back then, you know, sometimes I might have just had to hold on to my seat, hush my mouth, and it's gonna pass. And then other times it's like, pop, it just like, oh my gosh, I just got caught up in my thinking, and it just pops and leaves. And that's the power of insight. When you have a shift in your thinking, nothing out here has to change, but it's like everything changes when you see it differently. Your perspective changes. And so that's how I was able to then, you know, my agoraphobia and my fear of so many things was able to melt away, because it was only made of thought in the first place. And that's freedom. In fact, I did a course recently, and one of the clients, he said, I've just had an insight. I was like, yeah, tell me. He goes, he said, I've just realized, I thought I knew what freedom was. He said, I thought freedom was being able to do what you want when you want. He said, I've just realized that it's not getting caught up in your thinking. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, not believing, you know, most of it.
Yeah, because most of it's a load of nonsense anyway. Yeah.
Right, so what I want to just do as a sort of final, because I know I'm aware of the time, and I want to go off into my circle community so that we can open it up for questions there. But as a final, and I've loved talking to you, Hannah, and I could actually talk to you for the whole hour, so thank you. What would you say to give someone hope who was really struggling with pain at the moment?
I always want to point people back to the fact that we cannot be broken. And this is I got a deeper insight about this recently. Because if thought is a creative spiritual energy, you can't break spiritual energy. If something is formless, it has no form to break. That's who we really are. Infinite love, infinite creativity. And it's only when it comes into my little, you know, screen of consciousness, it takes a form of anxiety or expectations and resentments and all those kind of things. And then I fall for that illusion. And then it moves out again, because like I said, it's always moving. When I saw that's why we can say with absolute confidence, you are not broken. You can't be damaged. You don't lack anything, unless I think I am. That to me was freedom. So that's something I always want to point people to, is like, you don't need fixing. Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Hannah. And I'm going to close the podcast down, and I just want to say thank you. You have been amazing. Where can people find you? I will put everything in the show notes, but just in case people don't want to read, where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you. I have a website. It's my name, chanastudley.com. There's a lot of information on there about courses and retreats and things like that. I have 2 books, so The Myth of Low Self-Esteem, which is more about trauma and the PTSD, and then Painless, which is about the chronic pain journey. They're both novels. They're both on Amazon. I have a Facebook group, which is, it started out being about trauma and then pain, and now it's just a general, you know, talking about stress and well-being. And so that's, you can just look me up on Facebook. And so, yeah, I have another book coming out, hopefully in the next couple of months, and it's another novel, but it's about hormones, everything from PMS to PMDD to menopause, everything that women, you know, go through, and this, you know, it's a journey, a health journey as well, you know, with wellness, a happy ending. So,
yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm really looking forward to that one that's coming out for sure. Right. Thank you so much. I'm going to close this down, but just want to say, for the purpose of the podcast, thank you. You have been amazing.
Thank you.